amazing gift to the world. Her insight on leadership, on people, on talent, on acquisition, on practices, on sound practices, on even the skills and traits necessary that people are hiring for is what you're going to be wanting to listen to today. Lynne lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, my hometown, and I believe Lynne is going to have some insight to push you to be all that you know that God has designed you to be. So let's take a moment, jump into this series today. But before we do so, y'all know I got to shout out something this year. I wrote a book, producing in a pandemic, right? I wrote a book called Necessary Endings. Necessary Endings details my own journey through mental illness, through depression, through anxiety, and to where I am today, and some mindsets that had to change in order for me to be the person that God called me to be. It's a book, $14.99 for the paperback, $8.99 for the Kindle version. Just go to Amazon, search Necessary Endings Justin Lester, or click the link in the show notes and you can grab a hold of a copy of Necessary Endings just for you. That being said, let's jump into our Zoom conversation today. Now, as you heard me say, it was recorded on Zoom, which means the audio quality is not the best, but the information is the best for you. And I pray it pushes you to be all that God's called you to be. Let's jump into our conversation today. Let's take it away. Well, hey everyone, welcome to Made for Mondays with Justin. I'm so happy you guys are here today as we're continuing the series on leadership and transition, the different areas of our lives and how God is calling something in us out into the world. And so I pray you guys have been blessed. And today I have a very special guest all the way from my hometown in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Unfortunately, out by my arch rival. I went to Brookfield Central. You're out there by Menominee Falls, and we can't stand. I hated playing football against y'all. But anyway.
It makes you feel any better. My boys they go to Rufus King. So
we don't
even go to school out here.
Yeah, they beat us too. It was bad. I hated playing Rufus King because I played Rufus King when y'all had Lance Kendricks and he destroyed us. And I know this is totally side. This is Lynne LaGrant. Hi, Lynne. But when I played against Lance came across and blocked me once. I was a DN. He killed me, and I was just done with King because I was like, we don't lift like that at Brookfield Central. Anyway, welcome to the podcast, Mr. Lynne.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Justin. It is an honor to even be invited onto your podcast and a pleasure. So thank you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. A lot of the reason I wanted to invite you is going back to a conversation you and I had. I think it was like my second year ministry. We came to Milwaukee, and out of nowhere, I was in this space of really trying to figure out and crafting, like, what is leadership? What does it mean to lead people? What does it mean to talk to people? And your insight you gave then really helped me then be intentional about what I'm reading, how I'm talking, how I'm leading my people, and not just like the unpaid staff, my paid staff as well. And so as I thought about that, when I was thinking about leadership, I was like, man, I would reach out to Lynne and hear about your story and who you are now and how you're getting to where you are. And so I want to start there, if you don't mind. Just kind of let us know, like, who are you? What do you do? What do you do now? Where are you at in life? All of that.
Oh, thanks for that, Justin. So, Lynne LaGrant, I am a wife. I am a mother of two amazing young men. I am super involved in church. I've been a co-youth leader for, 18 years now.
Oh my gosh.
With my husband, Rob, who's also a deacon there. I also teach church school for our adult class, so that's a big part of who I am. Professionally, most recently, I was the global vice president for people development for Molson Coors beverage company. And many of you may not recognize that name, but you do recognize the products. So essentially I work for a beer company. So if you've heard of Molson Canadian or Miller Lite or Coors Light or Star Promin or any of those kind of products, that was the company that I was most recently working for. And I was responsible for capability developing all over the globe, as well as leadership development, succession planning, talent management, and so on. So I had a staff of approximately 105 individuals around the world, and we supported about 25,000 employees for Molson Coors. So I've been doing human resources and leadership development for at least the past, 15 to 18 years, but I started off my career as actually a high school English teacher. And so I work with adjudicated youth in Kankakee, Illinois. And it was an amazing experience. And it's interesting because what you'll see is that there's two things that I think are constant threads throughout my life. Number one, my love for children and youth. And then secondly, my love for education, whether it's teaching high school, teaching church school, or now being responsible for building capabilities and leadership development in corporate organizations.
Oh, wow. No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. You mentioned there's a number of things in your job description and title that I'm really curious about, but also, and I know we talked about it before we got in, I think it's a big part of just who you are and like where you're headed now. In the midst of like COVID and whatever this, I call it the Corona and cop season. How have you continued to develop your capabilities, your skill set in this like COVID and cop season?
Yeah. So I would say that I'm blessed that I had the opportunity during this time of COVID to be on garden leave. And so I took some time off working intentionally to finish my dissertation. Okay, I'm currently finishing my PhD with the University of Pennsylvania, and the last thing on my list is my dissertation. And as many of you know, finishing the coursework is the easy part. It's this dissertation that'll just kick your butt and be drawn out forever. But I was very intentional that I was going to take this time and really lean in and work on my dissertation. And my focus on my dissertation was with regards to does a sense of belonging have an impact on women leaders in professional environments? So in other words, if women feel like they have a sense of belonging, are they more successful? Do they have a larger intent to stay with the organization? Is their career progression greater? And so therefore, I've been doing just a ton of reading on this idea of belonging. And it has been a fascinating exercise because now, not only in this time of Corona virus and COVID-19, we also have a lot of social injustice happening right now, and specifically, targeting Black people in the United States. And so when I started thinking about this whole idea of belonging, initially my first thought, of course, was on, women in the workplace. But what I'm reading and understanding about it is so much bigger. And so therefore, I've been doing studies and reading all of this literature on belonging and diversity and inclusion and equity and what that really means. But then that caused me to go back to my undergrad, and I reread The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and which is an amazing book written in the 1960s. And you read it today and it sounds like it was written in September of 2020. It sounds like today. And so that's helped me a lot. So reading for my dissertation and really staying abreast of that, going back and reading some of my undergrad literature that I love, but then also, listening to podcasts, like this one. I've been really into finding different voices and listening to podcasts and understanding kind of new voices and what's going on out there. And you have to do this because one thing you can't be is stagnant in your career and your mindset and in your development. And so you have to be hungry. And I've always been very curious and I wanted to see how things connected. And so you look at it from a multitude of perspectives. If you read magazines, one of the things that my family has been really intentional about lately, since my boys have been teenagers, holidays like Christmas aren't the same thing, not for, Camden, of course, Justin. He still has that wide-eyed excitement, for holidays like Christmas. My boys, not so much, because they're those cynical teenagers. Mm-hmm. And so we've been very intentional about Christmas gifts, saying it's one thing you want, one thing you need. I forgot the third one. Oh, forgive me. But the last one is something to read. Wow. And so I also invested in, and I asked for Christmas a subscription to Harvard Business Review. And so I read the Harvard Business Review, and I keep up on current trends in, business and development and all those areas.
Wow. That's powerful. There's a lot of things there's a lot of things you said in that I'm curious about. One, your whole dissertation. This year for me personally, I've dedicated to reading only Black women authors.
Oh,
And there's
wow.
so many stories that have unearthed, and our church is doing the same thing. We're only reading Black women authors in our monthly book
I,
reads.
I
And
love that.
yeah, it's been eye-opening. It's been phenomenal. We have a discussion later this month, and it's been great. And there's so many things I never realized that just being a Black male I overlooked. And then the
Mm,
sense of belonging in spaces like there's a book by Nestle Strain Harris, and she talked about that very thing. And I never noticed it, never recognized it, but then becoming more sensitive to it. And I'm actually very curious about your research as well. And then, but beyond that too, I'm curious. Then you mentioned the ways that you professionally navigated it. What are some things in the midst of that you learned about yourself as you
mm,
have made, because it sounds like you've been really principled, really particular about even like what you allow in your space and intentionally pouring into your space. What is
mm.
just yourself? What are some things you've learned about yourself as you've grown on this, this journey of all this?
Yeah, I think you said something key right there when you speak of intentionality.
Mm,
Early on in my career, I realized that I wanted to be around leaders who could inspire me, could teach me something new, that were open, and so I deliberately sought out those leaders. Now, my career progression is a little unique because I have been blessed to have three very senior African American leaders. Two of them were senior vice presidents. One of them was the chief human resource officer. And so it changes your experience when you have that and the level of support that I had with them. So it allowed me to be very intentional about my choices. Prior to joining Molson Coors, I was with another company, and I won't say the name. It's a bigger company here in it's based in Wisconsin, Georgia, and a couple other places around the country. And it was a great role. I was responsible for enterprise learning and development globally. I met with the CEO on a regular basis. I had his ear, and I was in this role for 18 months. it was
wow.
it was easy, it was second nature, but the environment was toxic. The culture was so different than what I wanted and what I needed, and my values were misaligned with the organization's values.
Wow.
And it wasn't that the people weren't great. The people were wonderful, and I really had a good time there. But it was the values of the organization and just the way that they operated and did business. I couldn't deal with it. And it wasn't that I wasn't making good money. I was making great money. I had a great title. I was traveling. I had a big team.
Hmm.
And they loved me,
Hmm.
but I couldn't sit in another meeting and have a senior leader curse at me.
Wow.
I'm just not going to allow that. Or, I'm not going to be in a place where the organization says very loudly, we're not going to invest any money in the community because if I get a bigger tax break somewhere else, I want to be able to pick the whole company up and leave this area. So they were very intentional about not investing in the community in which they existed, in which their employees came from.
Wow.
And so it was just such a misalignment in my values that I couldn't see myself there long term. And
Wow.
I had to make a really hard decision to leave. But, thank God, he doesn't put anything on your heart
Hmm.
unless it needs to be on your heart. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
That's so true.
And so the fact that I was getting up going to work every day, and I remember driving to work and just feeling like, I just don't want to be here.
Wow.
And there was nothing wrong. It's just I just didn't want to be there. I didn't want to go there. And being very quiet and letting God talk to me and tell me, like, don't worry, I'm gonna move you. You just
Hmm.
do what you're supposed to do, and I will
Hmm.
move you. And like I said, I was there for less than 18 months. I was a director at the time. And a boss from a previous organization called me and said, hey, my neighbor needs somebody at her company to run a department. Are you interested? And I'm like, I sure am. And it ended up being the best decision I ever made. That's when I moved. At the time, it was to Molson Coors, and I moved over. It was lateral. It was a director level, and in less than 7 or 8 months, I was promoted to global vice president.
Wow.
And so, you know, you have to be so intentional and so clear about what your needs are. And for me, my value set was really important. I didn't want to be in an environment where I would come home and feel just beat up and beat down, and it just wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my family. And, you know, you have to think about what's best holistically for you. And it's not the money, it's not the title, it's not the perks that go along with it. What I found was that when I got to a point where my values were consistent with the organizational values, and I found a leader who I truly cared about, the money, the accolades, the title, all of that came along with it. But I had to be seeking that first.
Wow. I guess, so I have two questions with that, that I'm curious about. So on one hand, I'm curious about developing a community corporate culture, right? That doesn't make their employees feel like that. Because of you, actually, I think I can find it. But I bought Lincoln's The Advantage because of you. We had this conversation when I was there, and I was in the process of developing a culture for our team. And because of that, I was just like, I'm gonna read on culture and come. So that's because of our conversation that shifted. Our current vision, learn, live, lead, is your fault. So anybody listening to this from our church, blame Lynn, but that's why we're like sewing into our community.
Not at all. Not at all, Justin. You're so brilliant. You just brought it all together.
But no, like, importance of culture. And then also at the same time, I'm curious too, for you, as you move from being, so you mentioned director level positions. So I guess I'm curious about your transition to navigating a space as a mentor. Like, you have mentors, but as a mentor, not the mentee all the time. So it's a two-phase question. I don't want to forget about culture, and then also you being a mentor as well as being mentored, and all of that. Yeah.
All right, so let's attack the culture one first, because that's so important. I mean, what kind of culture do you want when you go into work? You know, and I was very, very clear about the kind of culture I wanted to be in. And so when you think about culture, you know, the company owns the culture. They set the standard for the culture, but leaders are the ones that really execute on it, you know, and it becomes the little things. It becomes how they greet you in the morning. It becomes how they reward you. And I'm not talking monetarily, you know, do they say thank you? Do they take your ideas? Do you have a voice in the room? Or do you have to have a title in order to have a voice? You know, it's those little things that mean so much in a culture. And especially when you're trying to really engage people. And this is so critical. Your culture has to be an engaging culture. And you engage people through allowing them to have that kind of voice. Do they feel a level of ownership in what's going on and the decisions that are happening? Now, as a leader, there are some decisions that you have to make, whether people like them or not. And it's really unfortunate, but you got to make those decisions. But there's other times where you truly want other people's input. So are you creating a culture that allows for this kind of open discourse to say, hey, I think that's a great idea, and I think we should do this, or hey, you know what, I'm not feeling that idea. How about we think about it this way? And so are you allowing those kind of conversations to happen? That creates an engaging culture, because each person then feels like, I have ownership in what's happening. Do I see how my specific actions are directly tied to the organizational goal? Do I see how I'm having impact there? And can I see my voice, my signature on this project, or my spin on this project? Because nobody shows up wanting to do a bad job. You know, this is so important. Nobody shows up wanting to do a bad job until you disengage them.
Wow.
All right. So people show up, if they are engaged, they want to do a good job. They want to bring their talent, their expertise, you know, their excitement to a project. But at that point, when you disengage them, then they show up every day just to destroy you. And you have to be so careful about that and how you set people up for that. So culture is super important. The organization sets the standard for the culture, but leaders are responsible for really executing on that and showing those behaviors through all of the small things. But I think the most important thing is voice. When you allow people to have a voice in decisions and ownership and in thoughts and innovation, that is how you create a welcoming and open culture, an innovative culture as well for new ideas. So that's my answer with regards to culture. Now I'm going to be a little bit of controversial for you, okay? Mentoring. I will say that I have had a lot of really bad mentors. And I will also say that I believe that women and Black people specifically, and I'm being very careful because I don't like the term people of color. Like I'm calling us out. We are Black people, all right? Yes. Women and people, Black people, excuse me, almost tripped me up there. But women and Black people, we have been over-mentored, okay? And what do I mean by that? I have seen situations where as the mentee, I have a mentor, okay? And I'm asking this person questions and they feel like it is their duty to pour into me. Let me tell you how I made it. Let me tell you, you know, the steps that I took. You know, just follow my footsteps and I'm gonna show you the right thing to do. And what you find is that organizations look at a mentee-mentor relationship and the mentor ends up being promoted because, oh my gosh, you're doing such a great job with that person. You're developing them. You're a great leader. I'm going to promote you. And then the mentee, their reward for being in this process is, well, you got time with that mentor. Isn't that enough? That's your reward. And so they miss out on those opportunities. In my experience, I've had some really amazing sponsors and champions. And I think that we have to get away from mentoring and really focus on sponsors and champions. There's an actual book that says, forget a mentor, get a sponsor. Wow. All right. And this is so important because for Black people and women specifically, you know, they tell us to go get a mentor. So then you see somebody who, you know, is doing really good and they're really smart and they're handling their business. And these organizations tell you, you know, you should approach that person, ask them to coffee, and then ask them to be your mentor. The reality is that specifically white men do not operate like that. Wow. They don't operate like that at all. Instead, what happens is they form a relationship with somebody who they think is doing really good and, you know, is super smart and really capable through commonalities. Okay, through all kinds of different commonalities. And the mentoring relationship grows organically. And so then what happens is that they skip right over mentor and go right to sponsorship. And sponsorship is, where mentoring is one way, sponsorship is mutually beneficial because sponsorship says, hey, I have some really good skills and I want to help you, Justin. And Justin says, hey, you know what? I could use your skills. And because I can use your skills, I'm going to introduce you to certain people. And I'm going to put you on different projects to make sure that people see your different skills. Wow. So it becomes a mutually beneficial relationship instead of this one-way relationship. As the person who is receiving the sponsorship, all right, I'm put into places where I can perform, where I can show people that's not in my typical circle, specific aspects of how good I am, or my skill set. Mm-hmm. And then you, as the sponsor, all right, you've identified talent in different ways, and you're getting work done in a different way, in a more effective way. We need to get to sponsorship. Wow. And then the third one is champions. And I've had an amazing champion in my last manager, and her name is Michelle. And she basically would kick my butt And when I say that, I truly mean it. She had very high standards for me. And she set the expectation level very high, but she knew that I would rise to the occasion.
Wow.
And because she knew that I would rise to the occasion, then she began to give me projects that would expose me to areas of the business that I had never been exposed to before. And she championed what I did and said, you know what? Lynn did this over here. She can do 10 times better over there for you. Let me show you what I mean by that. And so she began saying my name in rooms that I didn't even know my name was being said in.
Wow.
And I started getting calls from people saying, hey, Michelle told me to reach out to you, said that you were phenomenal in this. And that is how my career began to be built. And so, you know, mentoring is great. Don't get me wrong. When I look back at my life, I have mentors here and there, all right, for things here and there. But then I get so excited when I start thinking about the sponsors and the champions that I've had. And when I wanted to move up in my career, it was my sponsors and my champions that helped me on that career progression and not my mentors.
Wow. So when is your book coming out? I've never heard mentorship like that before in my entire life. And because you're right, when you were talking, I was like, geez, every book I've read was written by a white man who said, you know, go find someone, see what they're doing, sit under them, learn all of that. I've never seen, and when I look back on my life, like when you talk about champions, I can say, like, honestly, it was my pastor who went on to glory, and then my previous pastor who's still in Nashville, who would be champions. And because he gave me a $3 million project and said, here you go. And I never forget, had to make a presentation in front of like 4 millionaires on our board of directors. And I was like, God, I've never known this much money is possible. But it's because of that when our church received this, we sold a piece of property, received a great payout of money, that I was able to stand in front of our church and say, this is what we're going to do. So you're very right. That is a powerful, really hot take. That is a beautiful take that I'm like, please get that, TM.
You know, and it's funny because when I say that, you know, some people, you know, when I always have to give a disclaimer, like, okay, you're not going to like what I'm about to say, but hear me out. Trust me, okay, on this. And I think that, you know, we have it beat into our heads. You know, if you go to any kind of professional development that is typically, you know, led by a white man who's made it, you know, it wasn't because he had these great mentors. There was a level of nepotism. There was a level of association. There was a level of all kinds of things happening there. And unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of that. We simply do not. And so we have to be a lot more intentional about those kind of experiences. And it's not, you know, walking up to someone and asking them for a mentor. And in fact, Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, I'm not a fan. I read it. I'm not a fan. And people just are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you don't want to lean in. I don't, because when you read it, all right, Sheryl Sandberg came from wealth. She came from, you know, a community where her father could make a phone call and she could intern for a super senior person. And she had access that I will never, ever have. I'll never have that kind of access. My father was in the military. My mom was a nurse. I'm the middle child of 5, and we went to public schools, you know, and we were happy. So I don't have that kind of access that she does. And so I don't believe in this lean in crap. It's a lie. Okay. I don't believe it. But she did say the same thing about mentoring. She said, men will just, you know, they will form relationships, and then the relationship will lead to other things. All right. So when you're reading these books, you also have to have a discerning mind.
Yeah.
You have to say, you know, some of it is going to be, you know, worthy. Other of it, throw in the garbage, and don't allow the hype, you know, lean in to make you think that what you're feeling and what you see is different, or it's wrong. It's not. Wow. Actually, your experience is your experience. And Sheryl Sandberg is not my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's real. No, it's funny. I remember the Lean In book came out, and every pastor I knew that had never read a leadership book read that book because it was a bestseller. And I got tired of the Lean In crap. And then when I read it,
I had the book and I put it on the side. I think Court read it, and then I don't even know where that book is. I think it's someplace in Nashville, someplace. Because I couldn't do that. I began to get into a different lane, and I agree with you. I didn't realize until I started doing more research that how many leadership books are written by white men, and how many leadership books are written by white, and then like the privilege that comes with it. That is, I hope you all are listening and engaging with this, because that is real life. And be, like you said, be a discerning person. I guess the last question I'll ask you, I was going to ask you a question about transition to workplace, how it's different. But I guess with that, I guess a better question that I would ask you is, what would you tell someone who is like going back into the workplace, getting back into whatever this is, whether it's online, in person, whatever it is, but getting back into a mood of working consistently, things like that. If you knew that someone would listen and apply it, what are like 2 things you would tell someone to really get past where they are to get to the place where God really needs them to be?
Mm. Oh, that's such a good question. That's a toughie. Um, so first, I would say be clear about why you are doing what you are doing. And what I mean by that is, if you work in finance, why are you working in finance? What is your own personal mission statement? My husband is a wealth advisor, and he will tell you that he is in that job so that he can help people who didn't have financial literacy build wealth for their families and their communities. And that's really important to him. And that's his mission. And so he gets very excited when he gets to work with people that don't have that same kind of access, or who have never heard of the stock market or bonds or trading or anything like that. So be very clear on why you are doing what you are doing. Right. And have your own personal mission statement, because that is going to allow you to filter all the other mess out. You're going to be able to be so intentional about what you want to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is, and this is going to go against conventional wisdom, all right? But I would say compartmentalize your life, all right? When you leave work, leave work. When you are home, be home. When you need to take care of yourself, take care of yourself, and don't let anything in. And you have to find a space for yourself where you can truly do that. For me, it was Bikram yoga, hot yoga. And when I tell people that, I love doing it, they're like, "Are you serious? It's 100 degrees in there, and it's too hot." And my husband went with me one time. He said, "Never again." But I love the practice so much, because in the midst of it, I realized one time that I wasn't thinking about anything else except for what I was doing right then and there at that moment. I wasn't worried about my family. I wasn't thinking about work. I wasn't thinking about what I was going to make for dinner or anything. All I was focused on was holding this particular yoga pose, and how many times in life, during the day even, do you realize that you are solely focused on the moment? And so having that space to compartmentalize that was really important, so that I knew that if I was having a really stressful time at work, it was time for me to go to yoga and just have some time off and really just be in that moment. I knew that being at home with my family is super important to me. So I carry 2 cell phones, and everyone's like, "Why would you do that?" Well, because I need to be very clear about my life and my work. And then when I go to bed at night, so many people take their phones with them in their bedrooms and whatnot. My phone is in the kitchen in a drawer because I need separation, and what I've learned is that I enjoy those compartmentalized times so much more. Whether it's work, I'm more focused on work, because I know that once I'm done here, I get to go do something else and I don't have to worry about this time right now. I love hot yoga because I literally can shut everything off and just be in the moment. I love the stuff that I do at church because I know it's all about ministry and God in that moment. Yeah. And so you have to learn how to do that. Whereas some people tell you it all blends together. That's how you go crazy. Right? I
Wow.
need separation.
Wow, Lynn, thank you so much for this. And I pray you guys listening to this morning take these things to heart as you go into your work day and as you go into this week to own it as we end this year well. The last thing I was to ask you, Lynn, is really like, well, actually, this beginning, I want to know what are 2 books that we have to read?
Oh, 2 books that you have to read right now. So I got to be honest with you. I am kind of old school in my thinking. So I'm going to go back to The Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Okay.
All right. If you haven't read it, read it now. And if you did, reread it.
Okay.
All right. Because it will ground you on so many different things. And then the second book, that's a really great question. You were talking about, Black women authors. And I do believe that you got to read for learning, but you also got to read to reconnect with your history, reconnect with your ancestors. And so I'm a huge Toni Morrison fan.
I'm Toni.
Oh my gosh, she's my role model. I love her.
Yeah.
And so the things that I love about Toni Morrison is that if you don't have time to read a novel, she has a series of short stories and a series of essays that she's written about society, about our history, about who we are as a people that I find is so fulfilling and thought-provoking. So
okay,
I would say those 2 things.
Yes, and if y'all have not read Toni Morrison yet, y'all have not listened to this podcast. Because I'm Toni. When she died, I had like 3 weeks dedicated to her. Like I couldn't.
Justin, I'm a Toni groupie, okay?
Listen.
I was so blessed to see her when she
really?
Came to Milwaukee. Yes, and I brought all my books and she signed them all, and I was just like, shaking in her presence because she is a literary giant, just an amazing mind, amazing woman, amazing heart. So
wow, no, that's so wonderful. No, I was introduced to her. It's sad to say this, in my second master's at Vandy, and ever since I started reading her, I haven't put it down. But it took too long. That was also a whole nother narrative. That was the first time I ever had a Black male teacher. So it's like it took until 24 to have a Black male teacher. It took till 24 to find out about Toni Morrison after Marquette. So that's interesting. Anyway,
that's data. That's all I'm saying.
Lynn, thank you so much for your time today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation. We could talk for hours.
Oh my gosh, I could. I really was thinking that. If somebody wanted to get in contact with you, with the work that you're doing, all of that, how can someone find you on socials and all of that?
Yeah, so you guys got to search for me because it's not easy. And so Justin's been, calling me Lynn, and I'm Lynne LaGrant because my friends and my family definitely call me by that name. However, professionally, my name is Synethia Lagrant. And so you can find me on LinkedIn. I guarantee I'm the only Synethia Lagrant out there. It's spelled Syneathia. So if you go to linkedin.com/Synethia, you'll find me. So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. On Instagram, I'm Synethia. On Facebook, I'm Lynne LaGrant. So I look forward to connecting with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. And Made for Monday crew, please be sure to follow and like and share and repost what you see on our pages as well if you were definitely blessed today. You guys, let's go into our days. Remember, make the decision to live. And you were made for Mondays. Mondays don't own you. You own your Mondays. Start your week well and let what you start with be a better starting point for even next week. So let's have a great day. You guys were made for this. Now go win Mondays.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today for Made for Mondays. I pray today blessed you to be all that God has called you to be, all that you know you can be. I mentioned this a couple again. First of all, the month of November, I want to dedicate to you, the listener. If there are questions that you have about leadership, about life, about anything at all, do me a favor. Here's all you have to do. Go to jrlester.com and click on Made for Mondays. And on Made for Mondays is a contact form, and simply submit your question for me. What you're able to do is let me know, hey Justin, this is what I'm curious about. This is what I want. And my responsibility on Made for Mondays is to ensure that you are the best leader you possibly can be. So go ahead, go to jrlester.com, click that link, let your boy know, I'll holler back at you. Now let's say our affirmation, and repeat after me if you will. Say, I am me. I can be me. No one will stop me from being me. You were made for this. Now go win your Mondays. Mondays won't